The Great Hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Jake Morrison stepped up to the speaking platform. His blue eyes looked tired, and his usually neat brown hair showed signs of stress. The human ambassador wore his formal diplomatic uniform, but something felt different about him today. The alien delegates from hundreds of worlds watched him with curious eyes, not knowing this would be the last time they would see a human in their chambers. Jake looked around the massive room with its floating platforms and strange alien architectures. He had stood here many times before, fighting for human rights, defending human colonies, and trying to make the galaxy understand his people. Today felt different. Today felt final. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices that allowed all species to understand each other. I come before you today not to debate or negotiate, but to inform you of a decision that has already been made. Council Chairman Mordak, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, leaned forward in his seat. His large black eyes focused on the human with interest. Around the chamber, other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Something in Jake's tone warned them that important news was coming. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately, Jake said simply. The silence that followed felt heavy and thick. Then suddenly, voices erupted from all directions. Delegates shouted questions in dozens of languages. Translation: devices worked overtime, creating a chaos of overlapping sounds. Some beings stood up from their seats, others pointed at the human ambassador with various appendages. Vextar of the hegemony, whose red scales gleamed under the chamber lights, was among the loudest. "This is ridiculous," he declared, his serpentine voice carrying over the noise. "Humans cannot simply leave. They have obligations, treaties, agreements with member worlds." Jake waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "All human treaties and agreements are hereby terminated. All human representatives will be recalled from their positions. All human military assets will be withdrawn from Council territory within 72 hours. "You cannot do this," shouted Ambassador Keltar from the Crystalline Confederation. Her crystal body rang like a bell when she moved in anger. "What about the colonies under human protection? What about the trade agreements? What about the research? Projects?" Jake's face remained calm and emotionless. "All human personnel will be evacuated. All human technology and research will be removed or destroyed to prevent misuse. Any being who wishes to join the human exodus is welcome to do so. But they must decide quickly." Chairman Mordak raised one of his 4 hands for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though angry murmurs continued from various platforms. "Ambassador Morrison, surely we can discuss this. If there are complaints about recent policies, we can address them through proper channels." For the first time since beginning his speech, Jake showed emotion. A slight smile crossed his face, but it was not a happy one. "The time for discussion has passed. The human limitation protocols were the final indication that this council does not view humanity as an equal partner, but as a threat to be controlled and contained." "The protocols were for the good of galactic stability," Vexastar hissed. "Humanity has expanded too quickly, developed too rapidly. Some structure was necessary." "Structure," Jake repeated the word slowly. "Is that what you call it, when you limit how many worlds we can settle? When you demand we share our technology but refuse to share yours? When you cap our fleet size while allowing others to build freely?" His voice grew stronger with each question. "When you vote to restrict human innovation because it makes you uncomfortable?" The chamber erupted again, but this time, Jake did not wait for quiet. He continued speaking over the noise, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "We came to this galaxy seeking friends and allies. We offered our knowledge, our strength, our loyalty. In return, you gave us suspicion, limitation, and fear. You treated us like children who needed guidance rather than equals who could contribute." Jake began walking toward the exit platform. "We will not argue anymore. We will not beg for acceptance. We will not fight for our rights in your courts and committees. We simply leave." "Wait," called Chairman Mordak. "Where will you go? The galaxy is vast, but Council space covers most of the habitable systems. You cannot survive alone out there." Jake paused at the edge of the platform and looked back one final time. "That is no longer your concern. Goodbye." The human ambassador stepped onto the transport platform and vanished in a shimmer of light. The delegates sat in stunned silence, staring at the empty space where he had stood. Within hours, reports began, flooding into the council chambers. Human ships were departing from every system simultaneously. Colonies were being evacuated with incredible speed and efficiency. Military vessels were withdrawing from patrol zones and defensive positions. Most, shocking of all, Earth itself seemed to be preparing for departure. Long-range sensors detected massive energy buildups around the human home system. Ships were gathering in numbers never before seen. Vextar watched the reports with growing unease. He had expected the humans to bluff, to make threats they would not follow through with. He had not expected this calm, organized withdrawal from galactic civilization itself. As the first day ended and human ships continued their exodus, one thought echoed through every delegate's mind. What had they done? 3 months had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost. The first signs appeared in the most basic places, in ways that seemed small at first, but grew into massive problems nobody had expected. Lisa Hayes gripped the controls of her cargo ship as warning lights flashed across her dashboard. The navigation system, a beautiful piece of human engineering that had guided her safely through dangerous space lanes for 5 years, was dead. Red symbols covered her screens, showing system failures she had never seen before. "Computer, run. Diagnostic on navigation array," she commanded in her native Zephyrian language. "Diagnostic complete," the artificial voice replied. "Navigation system requires maintenance protocols designed by human technicians. No repair options available with current crew qualifications." Lisa felt her heart sink. She was carrying medical supplies to a colony world where people were dying from a plague. The direct route would take 3 days through asteroid fields and gravity wells that required precise navigation. Without the human system, she would have to take the long route through safe space, which would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks too late to save the colonists. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Alan Price sat in his laboratory on Kepler Station, staring at research that represented 2 years of work. Half of the equations on his screens were incomplete, missing the human perspective that had made their project revolutionary. His research partner, Dr. Rachel Burns, had vanished along with all the other humans. Her desk still held personal items she had left behind: a photo of her family on Earth, a coffee mug with strange human writing, a small plant from her home world that was now dying without her care. "Zephlon, can you complete the protein synthesis sequence?" Alan asked his remaining partner. The Altarian scientist's 4 eyes focused on the data screens, studying the complex molecular structures they had been developing. "The logic is clear. Up to this point," Zephlon said in his careful, precise voice. But then Dr. Burns made what she called an intuitive leap. The mathematical foundation for her conclusion is not apparent. Alan nodded sadly. This had been their pattern for months. Human researchers did not always follow logical steps that other species could understand. They made connections that seemed impossible, jumped to conclusions that somehow proved correct, and found solutions in places no one else thought to look. Without that human spark of creativity, their research had ground to a halt. Meanwhile, the economic impact was becoming impossible to ignore. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium released their quarterly report, and the numbers painted a grim picture. 40% of all technological patents in the past decade had human involvement. 60% of breakthrough innovations had come from human-led research teams. Corporation after corporation reported similar stories. Human-designed systems failing without human maintenance. Human-developed processes that no one else fully understood. Human solutions to problems that other species had declared impossible to solve. Captain Ben Clark of the Centaurian Defense Force found himself facing a crisis he never expected. His fleet had relied on human tactical advisors for strategic planning. Humans had an unusual gift for predicting enemy behavior and finding weaknesses in seemingly perfect defenses. Now, facing a pirate fleet in the Outer Rim, Ben realized how much they had depended on human insight. His tactical computers offered logical solutions based on mathematical probability. But the human advisors had always found the unexpected approach, the creative strategy that confused enemies and won battles with minimal casualties. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the pirate fleet is using formation patterns we've never encountered. Our computers cannot predict their next move." Ben studied the enemy ships on his display. 6 months ago, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster would have looked at this same display and immediately spotted something others missed. She would have found the pattern in the chaos, predicted the enemy's strategy, and developed a counterattack. That would have ended the engagement quickly. Instead, Ben was forced to order a full retreat, the first time his fleet had ever abandoned their patrol zone to pirates. The social impact proved even more devastating than the economic losses. Hundreds of worlds had grown accustomed to human peacekeeping forces. Human negotiators had ended civil wars, settled trade disputes, and prevented conflicts between alien species who could not understand each other. On the planet Xerion, two native species who had lived in peace for decades suddenly found themselves in open warfare. The human mediators who had helped them resolve their differences for 20 years were gone, and ancient hatred began to surface again. Ambassador Kyle. Rogers had spent his career helping the Xerions understand each other's cultural differences. His reports, stored in the Council archives, showed how human empathy and communication skills had bridged gaps that seemed impossible to cross. Now, without human guidance, the Xerions were remembering why they had fought for centuries before. The humans arrived. Dr. Ken Williams, one of the few non-humans who had worked closely with human research teams, made a disturbing discovery while reviewing abandoned human facilities. The humans had not simply packed up and left their equipment behind. They had systematically removed or destroyed anything that contained advanced technology. But traces remained, fragments of data that hinted at developments far beyond current galactic understanding. Energy efficiency improvements that should have been impossible. Propulsion theories that challenged basic physics. Medical techniques that could have revolutionized healing across the galaxy. They were holding back, Ken realized as he studied the partial data. They were sharing basic knowledge while keeping their real advances secret. The implications were terrifying. If humans had been limiting their contributions to simple improvements and basic innovations, what were they capable of when they applied their full potential? As the 4th month of human absence began, Council Chairman Mordak called an emergency session. Delegate after delegate reported the same story. Critical systems failing, essential research abandoned. Economic collapse spreading from world to world. "We must contact them," declared Ambassador Keltar of the Crystalline Confederation. "We must negotiate their return." "Contact how?" asked Vextar, his red scales now dulled with worry. "They have vanished completely. No communication signals, no trace of their fleets, no indication of where they went." The council chamber fell silent as the reality sank in. They had not simply lost a member species. They had lost the single most innovative, creative, and adaptable race in the galaxy, and nobody knew how to get them back. 6 months after the human exodus, Chairman Mordak authorized the largest search operation in galactic history. The mission had one simple goal: find the humans and bring them back. What they discovered during the search would change their understanding of humanity forever. Admiral Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the Centaurian dreadnought Seeker, studying the star charts that showed their search progress. Ryan was the highest-ranking human officer who had chosen to stay behind when his people departed. Many called him a traitor, but Ryan believed that cooperation between humans and aliens was still possible. Now, leading the search for his former people, Ryan was beginning to understand why they had chosen to leave. "Admiral, we're approaching the coordinates of New Denver Colony," reported Lieutenant Sophie Garcia, one of the few other humans who had remained with the Council forces. Long-range sensors show no life signs. Ryan nodded grimly. New Denver had been home to 50,000 human colonists just 7 months ago. It had been a thriving agricultural world that supplied food to 6 different systems. According to the evacuation records, every human had left voluntarily, taking only personal possessions. "Take us into orbit, Lieutenant. I want to see what they left behind." The Seeker dropped out of hyperspace above New Denver, and immediately, Ryan knew something was wrong. The planet's surface showed signs of massive industrial activity. Entire mountain ranges had been carved away. Lakes had been drained. Forests had been harvested down to bare soil. "Sir," called the sensor operator, "the planet has been systematically strip-mined. All useful minerals and resources have been extracted with incredible precision." Sophie studied her readings with growing amazement. "Admiral, these extraction patterns are impossibly efficient. They removed valuable materials while leaving the ecosystem structure intact. The planet will recover naturally within a few decades." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the hasty evacuation of refugees fleeing in panic. This was a planned operation that had taken years to complete. The humans had been preparing for their departure long before the Council imposed the limitation protocols. "Take us down to the main settlement," Ryan ordered. The landing party found New Denver, city completely intact but empty. Buildings stood undamaged, streets were clean, and power systems still functioned. But every piece of advanced technology had been removed. Computers, manufacturing equipment, medical devices, and communication arrays were all gone. Sophie discovered something even more disturbing in the research facility on the city's outskirts. "Admiral, you need to see this," she called over her comm unit. Ryan found her standing in a laboratory that had obviously contained sophisticated equipment until very recently. Cable connections and mounting brackets showed where complex machinery had been carefully removed. But what caught his attention was the data storage unit that had been left behind. "It's encrypted with human military codes," Sophie explained. "But I was able to access the theoretical research files. The files contained propulsion theories that made current galactic technology look primitive. Humans had been developing revolutionary faster-than-light drives in secret, systems that could cross the galaxy in days rather than months." "How long have they been working on this?" Ryan asked. "According to these timestamps, at least 15 years," Sophie replied. "This research began shortly after first contact with the galactic community." Ryan stared at the data with growing realization. The humans had not trusted the galaxy from the beginning. While participating publicly in council affairs, they had been secretly preparing for the possibility of leaving. The limitation protocols had not caused their departure, they had simply provided the excuse. The search fleet found similar evidence on dozens of former human worlds. Colonies that had been carefully emptied of everything valuable. Mining operations that had extracted resources with impossible efficiency. Research facilities that had been working on projects far beyond current galactic understanding. On the industrial world of Iron Mountain, they discovered the remains of shipyards that had been producing vessels using completely unknown designs. The construction bays were empty, but energy readings suggested they had been building ships larger than anything in the Council fleet. "Sir," reported Chief Engineer Bob Patterson from the surface, "these shipyards were producing vessels at least twice the size of our largest dreadnoughts. The power requirements alone should have been impossible with known technology, but the most disturbing discovery came from the former human military base on Titan 7. The base had been the headquarters of human defensive operations, responsible for protecting 3 entire sectors from pirate attacks and hostile alien incursions. Admiral Brooks led the investigation personally, accompanied by a team of Council intelligence specialists. What they found in the base's strategic planning center made everyone question everything they thought they knew about human military capabilities. These tactical simulations show engagements against unknown enemy forces," reported Commander Lisa Shaw, the Altarian intelligence officer. "The enemy ships use technologies that do not match any known galactic civilization. The simulations showed human fleets fighting massive battles against opponents who used weapons and tactics unlike anything in Council records. The enemy ships were enormous. Their energy signatures suggested power sources that defied understanding, and their strategic patterns implied intelligence that operated on completely different principles than known galactic species. "Sir," Sophie called from another workstation, "I found references to something called Project Exodus. The files are heavily encrypted, but the basic outline suggests this was a long-term contingency plan for humanity's complete withdrawal from galactic civilization." Ryan studied the partial files with growing dread. Project Exodus had begun during humanity's second year in the galactic community. It involved establishing secret supply caches, developing independent technology, and preparing for the possibility that humans might need to survive without alien support. The plan included provisions for evacuating not just human colonies, but taking with them all human knowledge, technology, and industrial capability. It was a blueprint for ensuring that humanity could continue to exist and develop even if completely cut off from galactic civilization. "They never trusted us," Ryan said quietly. "Can you blame them?" Sophie asked, gesturing at the intelligence. Reports spread across her workstation. "Look at these threat assessments." They were tracking hostile alien movements that the Council refused to acknowledge. They identified potential dangers that our intelligence services dismissed as impossible. The files contained references to signals from outside the galaxy, energy, signatures that suggested massive artificial constructs moving through intergalactic space, and mathematical models that predicted some kind of invasion within decades. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Peter King from the communications station, "I'm detecting a faint quantum signature. It's using human encryption patterns." Ryan rushed to the station. "Can you decode it?" "Partially. It appears to be a message fragment, probably left as a marker for any humans who might come looking." Peter worked at his controls for several minutes before looking up with a confused expression. "Sir, the message doesn't make complete sense, but it mentions something about external threats and preparation time." The fragment of message that Peter managed to decode contained only partial sentences. "Exterior galaxy threat confirmed, preparation time limited, Council rejection of evidence, independent action required." As the search fleet prepared to leave Titan 7, Ryan stood on the observation deck looking out at the empty planet. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity was building something, preparing for something, planning for something that the galactic community had refused to believe was real. The question that haunted him was simple. What had the humans seen that the Council had missed? 1 year had passed since humanity disappeared, and galactic civilization was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. What began as economic problems had become a cascade of failures that threatened to tear apart everything the Council had built over thousands of years. Vextar sat in his private chambers on Zentara Prime, reading reports that grew worse each day. The hegemony representative who had pushed hardest for the human limitation protocols now faced calls for his resignation from dozens of member worlds. His red scales had lost their luster, and his usually confident demeanor was replaced by the hollow look of someone who understood their mistake too late. The latest report came from the Outer Rim territories, where human peacekeeping forces had maintained stability for 20 years. Without their presence, ancient conflicts were erupting with devastating consequences. "The Korthax Empire has annexed 4 former human protectorates in the past month," read the intelligence summary. "Their expansion continues unchecked as local defense forces prove inadequate to resist their military advances." Vextar set down the report and activated his communication system. "Get me Agent Claire Johnson," he ordered his aide. Claire Johnson was one of perhaps 50 humans who had chosen to remain with the Council when their people departed. She had been working as a liaison officer, attempting to establish contact with the missing human fleet through quantum communication arrays scattered across the galaxy. Her face appeared on his display, showing the strain of months of fruitless effort. Her brown hair was pulled back severely, and dark circles under her eyes spoke of too many sleepless nights spent trying to reach her people. Any success with the communication attempts? Vextar asked, though he already knew the answer. From her expression. Nothing, Claire replied flatly. I've sent messages through every quantum relay in Council space. I've used emergency frequencies, diplomatic channels, and even personal communication codes from family members who stayed behind. Whatever the humans are using to stay hidden, it's completely blocking our signals. Vextar leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of failure. What about the search fleets? Any new discoveries? Admiral Brooks reports finding more evacuated worlds, but the same pattern everywhere. Complete removal of advanced technology, systematic resource extraction, and no clues about where they went. Claire paused, then added quietly, Sir, I need to tell you something. The other humans who remained behind are starting to disappear. What do you mean, disappear? 3 more left yesterday. Dr. Ken Williams from the Research Division, Captain Jenny Martinez from Fleet Command, and Engineer Bob Patterson. They didn't file departure requests or submit resignation papers. They just vanished, along with their personal possessions. Vextar felt a chill. Do you think they're being extracted somehow? I think they're being given a choice, Claire said, and most of them are choosing to leave. Across the galaxy, the economic situation had moved beyond crisis into complete breakdown. The Crystalline Confederation had defaulted on trade agreements worth billions of credits. Without human industrial capacity and their unique ability to work with volatile alien technologies, production had dropped to levels not seen since before first contact. Dr. Ken Williams, before his mysterious departure, had left behind a research report that painted an even grimmer picture. His analysis of abandoned human facilities revealed technology gaps that would take decades to fill if they could be filled at all. Human innovation drove advancement in every major field, his final report stated. Medicine, engineering, physics, computer science, military strategy, diplomatic relations, and industrial production all showed massive improvements during the 50 years of human participation in galactic civilization. Without their continued input, we face technological stagnation and eventual regression. The military situation was equally dire. Human tactical advisors had been present in every major military operation for the past 2 decades. Their absence left fleet commanders struggling to adapt to new threats and changing circumstances. Captain Ben Clark, now promoted to admiral after the resignation of 3 senior officers, found himself facing impossible choices in the outer rim. The Korthax Empire was advancing through former human territory, and his limited forces could not stop them. The humans understood something about warfare that we never learned, Ben reported to the Council during an emergency session. They fought not just with superior technology, but with creativity and adaptability. They saw opportunities where we saw only obstacles, found solutions where we found only problems. The latest intelligence reports showed Korthax forces using new tactics that seemed designed to exploit the absence of human strategic thinking. They attacked in patterns that confused traditional military doctrine, struck at targets that seemed strategically worthless but proved tactically devastating, and coordinated their operations with precision that suggested they had studied human defensive strategies extensively. It's as if they were waiting for the humans to leave, Admiral Brooks reported from his flagship. The Korthax knew exactly how to attack once human forces were no longer protecting these systems. Chairman Mordak convened daily emergency sessions as member worlds demanded action. The Altarian Collective threatened to withdraw from the Council if the human crisis was not resolved. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium talked openly about forming an independent alliance. Even longtime allies were questioning whether the Council could continue to function without human participation. We must face the truth, declared Ambassador Keltar during one heated session. The humans were not just another member species. They were the foundation that held our civilization together. Without them, we are falling apart. The social impact proved even more devastating than the economic collapse. Hundreds of worlds had grown dependent on human services that seemed minor until they were gone. Human teachers who had helped alien children learn about other species. human doctors who had developed treatments for diseases that affected multiple races, human engineers who had designed systems that different species could use together. On the colony world of Haven, a planet settled by 5 different alien species, civil unrest had erupted when the human administrators departed. The humans had spent 15 years learning to navigate the complex cultural differences between the species, developing systems that allowed them to coexist peacefully. Without human mediation, old prejudices surfaced quickly. The Zephyrians accused the Altarians of economic manipulation. The crystalline beings claimed the others were trying to suppress their religious practices. The hegemony settlers insisted their cultural traditions should take precedence over all others. What had been a model of interspecies cooperation became a war zone within months of the human departure. Dr. Alan Price, working desperately to complete the medical research he had begun with human colleagues, made a discovery that terrified him. Hidden in the quantum signatures of abandoned human medical equipment, he found partial data that suggested humanity had been developing treatments for diseases that did not exist yet. They were preparing for biological warfare, he reported, to the Council Medical Board. But not warfare against us. These treatment protocols are designed for pathogens that don't match any known galactic organism. The implications were staggering. If humans had been developing medical countermeasures for unknown biological agents, what did that suggest about the threats they expected to face? As the second year of human absence began, Agent Claire Johnson received a message that made her blood run cold. It came through channels she thought were completely secure, using encryption codes that only her missing colleague, Dr. Rachel Burns, had known. The message was brief. The enemy arrives sooner than predicted. Preparation time reduced. Those who wish to survive should prepare for evacuation. Final offer. Claire stared at the message for hours, knowing that she was being given a choice. Stay with the failing galactic civilization, or join her people in whatever they were building in the darkness between stars. For the first time since the Exodus began, she wondered if the humans had been right to leave. 2 years after the human Exodus, the breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Betty Lewis, a human archaeologist who had been conducting research on the far edge of the galaxy when her people departed, returned to Council space with information that would change everything. Betty had been working alone on ancient alien ruins when the evacuation began, and by the time she received the withdrawal order, human ships had already disappeared from known space. For 2 years, she had survived on her research vessel, continuing her work while trying to understand why her people had abandoned the galaxy. Now, she sat across from Admiral Ryan Brooks in the briefing room of the Seeker, her weathered face showing the strain of isolation. Her gray hair was longer than regulation allowed, and her clothes showed signs of improvised repairs during her long solitude. "I found something in the ruins," Betty began, activating a portable display unit that showed strange symbols and equations. "These markings are not from any known galactic civilization. They're warnings, left by a species that faced something terrible." Ryan leaned forward, studying the alien script. "Warnings about what?" "An invasion from outside our galaxy," Betty replied. "The beings who built these ruins called them the Devourers. According to the records, they consume entire civilizations, strip worlds of all life, and move on to the next galaxy." The display showed star charts that seemed to map movement patterns across vast intergalactic distances. The mathematics were complex, but the basic message was clear. Something massive was approaching their galaxy from the void between star systems. "How old are these ruins?" Ryan asked. "Approximately 50,000 years, Betty answered. "But that's not the most important part. While I was translating the warnings, I discovered something else hidden in the quantum signatures of the ancient technology." She activated another section of her display, showing data patterns that looked familiar, yet strange. "These are human communication protocols, Admiral. Recent ones dating from about 3 years ago." Ryan stared at the data in shock. "How is that possible?" "Someone has been updating the ancient warning systems with modern human technology," Betty explained. The old alien warnings were passive recordings. Someone modified them to actively scan for approaching threats and transmit the data using human quantum frequencies. The implications hit Ryan like a physical blow. The humans had not simply fled in anger or panic. They had discovered evidence of an approaching threat that the Council had dismissed or ignored, while the galaxy argued about limitation protocols and territorial rights. Humanity had been preparing to face an enemy that could destroy everything. "There's more," Betty continued, pulling up additional files. "I managed to decode some of the transmission data. The modifications were made by a human research team led by Dr. Rachel Burns." Ryan recognized the name immediately. Dr. Burns had been one of the human scientists who had repeatedly tried to present evidence of external threats to the Council. Her research had been dismissed as paranoid speculation by most alien scientists. "The data include star charts showing the projected path of the approaching force," Betty said, highlighting sections of her display. "According to these calculations, the enemy will reach the outer edge of our galaxy in 18 months. Ryan felt his blood turn cold. 18 months from when? "From now," Betty replied grimly. "The original projections gave us decades to prepare, but recent observations suggest they're moving faster than initially calculated." The archaeological data painted a terrifying picture. The Devourers traveled between galaxies in massive construct, ships that defied current understanding of physics. They existed partially outside normal space-time, which made them nearly impossible to detect until they were already close enough to attack. Each galaxy they consumed provided resources for building larger fleets and more powerful weapons. They had been crossing the universe for millions of years, growing stronger with each civilization they destroyed. "The ancient warnings describe their tactics," Betty explained, showing translated text that made Ryan's hands shake. "They begin by sending advanced scouts to study target civilizations. Then they attack with overwhelming force, focusing on infrastructure and industrial capacity. They don't want to rule, they want to consume everything and move on." The final "wah-shh" section of Betty's discovery was the most disturbing. Hidden in the quantum signatures were partial messages from human researchers who had apparently found ways to study the approaching threat directly. Dr. Alan Price, working with equipment Betty had brought back, managed to decode fragments of these hidden transmissions. The messages painted a picture of desperate preparation and calculated sacrifice. "Message Fragment 7, Alan read from his display. "Long-range observations confirm enemy fleet composition exceeds original estimates. Recommend immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel to prepared positions outside galaxy. Military construction proceeding on schedule but will require complete industrial mobilization." Message Fragment 12. Council continues to reject evidence despite multiple independent confirmations. Political considerations prevent adequate preparation time. Independent action authorized under emergency protocols. Message Fragment 18. Advanced scout activity detected in outer rim systems. Enemy reconnaissance confirms our galaxy as target. Estimated time to full invasion reduced to less than 2 years. All personnel must choose evacuation to secure positions or remain to support final defensive preparations. Ryan read the messages with growing horror and understanding. The humans had not abandoned the galaxy out of anger. They had evacuated non-essential personnel while preparing to fight an enemy that the rest of galactic civilization refused to believe existed. "They've been trying to save us," he whispered. Betty nodded sadly. The archaeological data includes references to previous civilizations that faced the Devourers. The ones that survived did so by uniting completely and dedicating all resources to military preparation. The ones that remained divided, that continued political conflicts while the enemy approached, were consumed entirely. Admiral Brooks called an emergency meeting of the Search Fleet Command Staff. When he shared Betty's discoveries, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. "Sir," reported Captain Helen Davis from the Intelligence Division, "this explains the resource extraction patterns we found on abandoned human worlds. They weren't strip mining for profit. They were gathering materials for military construction. It also explains the advanced propulsion research," added Chief Engineer Mike Stone. If they're building fleets to operate outside the galaxy, they would need faster-than-light capabilities far beyond current technology. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. Humanity's secretive behavior, their advanced technology development, their systematic preparation for departure, all made sense in the context of preparing for an intergalactic war. "We have to contact them," Ryan declared. "We have to let them know that we understand now, that we want to help." Betty activated her communication equipment, using protocols she had discovered in the ancient ruins. "I've been trying to reach them for months using these frequencies. Yesterday, I finally received a response." The message that came through was brief and encoded, but its meaning was clear. Defensive preparations nearing completion. Galaxy-wide evacuation no longer possible. Those who choose to fight should gather at the following coordinates within 6 months. Final offer. Ryan looked at the coordinates and felt his heart stop. They pointed to a location in deep space, far, outside the galaxy, where long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures that defied explanation. The humans had spent 2 years building something out there in the darkness. Something designed to fight an enemy that could destroy entire civilizations. And they were offering one last chance for the galaxy to join them. The question was, would the Council finally listen before it was too late? 5 years after their departure, humanity returned to galactic space, but not as the broken refugees the Council expected. Fleet Admiral Dan Carter's armada emerged from hyperspace around Zentara Prime in formation so perfect it looked like a single massive organism moving through the void. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. Sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed the largest Council warships, and smaller craft that moved with impossible grace through three-dimensional space. Energy readings showed power sources that operated on principles unknown to galactic science. Chairman Mordak stood in the Council chambers, watching the tactical displays with a mixture of awe and terror. The human fleet had appeared without warning, bypassing sensor networks and defensive systems as if they did not exist. No alarms had sounded, no detection grids had activated, until the ships were already in orbit above the Council capital. "Sir," reported the communications officer, his voice shaking, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Dan Carter's image appeared on the main display. He wore a uniform that was recognizably human but made from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. His brown eyes were calm, but carried the weight of someone who had seen things beyond normal understanding. "Chairman Mordak," Dan said simply, "we need to talk." Within hours, the Council chambers filled with delegates who had not seen a human face in 5 years. Admiral Carter entered alone, walking with the confident stride of someone who held all the advantages in the coming negotiation. His presence filled the room in a way that seemed impossible for a single person. "Members of the Galactic Council," Dan began, his voice carrying easily through the translation systems. "I bring greetings from the United Colonies of Humanity and our allies among the distant galaxies Federation." Murmurs rippled through the chamber at the mention of allies from other galaxies. Vextar, his scales now dull gray with age and stress, leaned forward in his seat. "Admiral Carter, we demand an explanation for humanity's abandonment of their obligations and responsibilities," Vextar said, trying to summon his old authority. Dan turned to look at the hegemony representative with an expression that was not hostile but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Obligations? Our only obligation is to the survival of intelligent life in this galaxy. That is why we have returned." He activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy from an external perspective. Red markers indicated massive objects, moving through intergalactic space, approaching from multiple directions. "The enemy we warned you about arrives in 18 months, Dan continued. "They call themselves the Collective of Eternal Hunger, though we refer to them simply as Devourers. Their advanced scouts have been observing this galaxy for the past year." The display zoomed in to show alien constructs that defied easy description. Ships the size of moons, built from materials that seemed to absorb light itself. Energy signatures, suggested technology that operated outside known physics. During our 5 years of absence, we have learned much about them, Dan explained. They have consumed 47 galaxies over the past million years. Each conquest provides resources and knowledge that makes them stronger. They are not interested in conquest or slavery. They want to strip every world of all matter and energy, leaving behind empty space. Chairman Mordak found his voice with difficulty. What do you propose we do? Unite completely under unified command or face extinction, Dan replied without hesitation. The Devourers have never been defeated by a divided civilization. Political conflicts, territorial disputes, species rivalries, all of these become irrelevant when facing total annihilation. He gestured, and the display changed to show defensive installations being constructed throughout the galaxy. Massive weapon platforms, shield generators, and fortress stations appeared on the star charts in positions that covered every possible approach route. For the past 5 years, we have been building defenses with the help of allies from 17 other galaxies who have faced this enemy before. Some of those allies are the last survivors of civilizations the Devourers consumed. They joined us because this galaxy represents the best chance in a million years to make a stand that might actually succeed. Admiral Ryan Brooks, who had been silent since the presentation began, finally spoke. Admiral Carter, what do you need from us? Dan's expression softened slightly as he looked at his former colleague. Everything, Ryan. Every ship, every weapon, every resource, every person capable of contributing to the defense effort. The Devourers can only be stopped by overwhelming them with firepower they cannot absorb or redirect. He activated another section of the display, showing technical specifications that made the Council's best scientists gasp in amazement. We offer to share all our technological advances freely. Propulsion systems that can move fleets across the galaxy in hours. Weapons that can destroy targets in parallel dimensions. Shield technology that redirects enemy attacks back at their source. The technologies displayed represented advances that should have taken centuries to develop. Humanity had compressed thousands of years of research into 5 years of desperate innovation. How is this possible? Asked Dr. Alan Price, who had been studying human technology for years. Necessity, Dan replied simply. When you face extinction, you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. We had help from species who had fought the Devourers before, but the core innovations came from human creativity applied without limitations or restrictions. Ambassador Kate Rogers, who had served as Dan's diplomatic advisor, stepped forward to address the Council directly. Her red hair was now streaked with silver, and her green eyes showed the strain of years spent preparing for war. The political structure you tried to impose on humanity was designed for a galaxy at peace, Kate explained. Limitation protocols, territorial restrictions, technology sharing agreements, all of these assume that survival is guaranteed and resources are unlimited. She gestured at the defensive installations shown on the displays. We built these with help from species who understand that survival requires unity of purpose and complete dedication of resources. Every decision was made based on military necessity, not political comfort. The technical presentations continued for hours, showing weapons that channeled energy from parallel dimensions, ships that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, and defensive systems that created localized distortions in space-time itself. The knowledge we offer comes with one requirement, Dan said as the presentation concluded. Immediate and complete unification under a single military command structure. The Council as a political entity must be dissolved and replaced with a war council dedicated solely to coordinating the defense effort. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Dan continued speaking over the noise. This is not a negotiation. The enemy does not care about your political systems or cultural traditions. They will consume everything equally. Vextar rose from his seat, his age-dulled scales reflecting the chamber lights. You expect us to simply surrender our sovereignty to human military command? Not to human command, Dan corrected. To unified command. The War Council will include representatives from every species, but all decisions will be made based on military effectiveness, not political considerations. Chairman Mordak looked around the chamber at delegates who were still arguing among themselves even as the threat of extinction loomed over them. The humans had offered salvation, but at the cost of everything the Council had built over thousands of years. Admiral Carter, Mordak said finally, if we refuse your offer, what will you do? Dan's expression did not change, but his answer carried absolute finality. We will continue our defensive preparations with whoever chooses to join us. When the Devourers arrive, we will fight them with whatever forces we have assembled. Some civilizations will survive behind our defenses. Others will not. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of choice. Unite and possibly survive, or maintain independence and face certain destruction. One by one, delegates began to cast their votes. The Crystalline Confederation voted to join the unified defense. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium agreed to military integration. Even the proud Altarian Collective chose survival over sovereignty. When the final vote was counted, only the hegemony had refused to join the unified command. Vextar sat alone among his colleagues, having chosen pride over survival. The motion passes, Chairman Mordak announced. The Galactic Council hereby dissolves itself and transfers all authority to the Unified Defense Command. Dan nodded with satisfaction. Then we begin immediately. Every day of preparation might mean the difference between survival and extinction. As the former Council delegates began receiving their new assignments in the war effort, Admiral Carter looked out at the stars where massive construction projects were already beginning. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as saviors. The question that remained was whether 5 years of preparation would be enough to stop an enemy that had consumed 47 galaxies. In 18 months, they would have their answer.